Okay.
Welcome, everyone. This is the November meeting of the Valley of the Sun Deconstruction and Reuse Work Group, and we welcome you and are happy that you're here to join us. As folks are coming into the meeting room, we'll cover a little bit of information. Today, we're going to be hearing from Keller Knoll and Stuart Vanden Hueval about Reaply's business-to-business SaaS-based re-commerce platform. But before we hand it over to them for our keynote, a little bit of information. First, if you've not joined us before, who or what is the Valley of the Sun Deconstruction Reuse Work Group besides a lot of funky letters? If our logo and our images don't give it away, we're based in the Phoenix, Arizona metropolitan area. We spotlight deconstruction, reuse, and sustainability progress, plans, and goals as models for local consideration and implementation, but we welcome participants regardless of geographic location. We also invite you to join us on LinkedIn in a little bit. I'll put a link for our LinkedIn group into the chat. You can also email us with any suggestions or questions, and we'll put that in as well. The meetings are sponsored by Stardust, which is a nonprofit in the Phoenix area for 28 years with deconstruction, reuse of building materials. So, before we focus on today, I'll give you a heads up about our next meeting, which will be Monday, December 11th, where we'll have a panel discussion. And that one is going to focus on the role of education in paving the way for deconstruction and reuse-related policy and legislation. And we're very fortunate to have Ina Gutierrez from the Rebuilding Exchange, Emily Noyes from Rethos, and Stephanie Phillips from the City of San Antonio. Now, this is a community, so it's good to know and connect with each other. We invite you to take a moment and share your name and your organization, your location in the chat. You don't know if you might discover someone that you want to have a follow-up conversation or a connection with after. And as you do that, we are going to launch 2 polls to learn a little bit more about who's with us today, what part of the country you serve, and what organization or sector you represent.
Hey, Bear.
Hello. Okay, first, we'd like to know what part of the country you represent or serve. So what we've got, and the map helps you identify it, there's the 5 basic regions of the United States. There's also an option if you're focused nationwide. And at times we do have participants from other parts of the world. So there's an option to select if you are outside the United States. And Jen, I think you're able to launch that poll. Hopefully that's working.
I've got participants logging in and answering as we go here. So I'll keep it open for just another 20 seconds or so and we'll.
Super, thank you. And I see folks are starting to introduce themselves in the chat. Thank you for that. And we've got about 30 participants. That should give you a feel for how many to expect in the poll.
Okay. Well, we have about 19 or 20 responses, so maybe we'll call it here. Okay. It looks like we have about 32% from the Southwest, a few more from the West and Midwest and other parts of the country. So welcome to everyone.
Super. Next, we'd like to understand what kind of organization or sector you're connected with or representing. So we've got a little bit of a longer list here, and you can choose many of these. You're only in one place, but we realize that many of you will be applicable to one or more of these options. So let us know, if you can, please, what kind of organization you're representing. And as folks are wrapping that up, let me share just a little bit of meeting information. If you've not joined us before, this is a pretty consistent way that we try to operate. The recording link will be made available afterwards to folks who've registered, which is why we always encourage people to register, even if you're not sure that your schedule is going to work, because you can get access to the meeting afterwards. To start with, go ahead and put any questions that you have along the way as Stuart and Keller are speaking. Go ahead and put those into the chat. But when they finish their prepared materials, we're going to open things up for questions and answers and discussion. So at that point, we probably will be able to use the raise hand feature. But if you got anything along the way that you just want to make sure we get in there, go ahead and put that into the chat as they're presenting. We try to leave things so that people have local control of your microphones and your cameras. So please just be aware of that. You should be able to unmute your camera, unmute yourselves or turn your cameras on or off at will. We don't control that. Okay. Also, there will be a very brief end of meeting survey. That's really just for the Valley of the Sun work group to help us improve our meetings. Let me stop sharing. And as our presenters are getting organized, let me once again welcome Keller Knoll, who's a customer success manager, and Stuart Vanden, who's a sustainability program manager, and they are both from Reaply. And they are going to be talking to us about Reaply's business-to-business SaaS-based re-commerce platform. And your slides are showing you're in business. Go ahead, Keller.
All right, thank you so much, Kathy. Fantastic introduction. We're really excited to be presenting in front of this group here today. So again, thank you for the invitation to do this. So myself, my name's Keller Knoll. I'm a customer success manager based here at Reaply HQ in Chicago. Stu is with me as well. He is in Chicago for the day, but usually based out of the Denver area. We're really excited to talk to you about our Circular Cities initiative and kind of go through a little bit more about the circular economy and where we see ourselves fitting into the grand scheme of things. And really kind of want to make this interactive as well. So any questions that you all have about Reaply, about the circular economy and how this all fits together and interacts, and about the platform specifically, and we'd love to answer any of your questions. So if you have any, you can raise your hand in here, throw something in the chat, and we'll do our best to monitor there. And get your questions answered, as well as having some time at the end of the presentation as well. All right, so perfect. Yeah, we're Reaply, so we're on a mission to build a community where every reusable resource finds its next use. So we were founded in 2016 here in Chicago, Illinois. And actually this number here has grown into the 20 millions now of asset value we've had running on the platform. We have, at this point, we have hundreds of ecosystem partners, as well as around $30 million in investment at this point. So here's a list of some of the companies that we work with. So we work with larger organizations, kind of facilitating internal reuse within large organizations and making sure that their assets can find external donation partners and other uses there. But what we really want to talk about today is our Circular Cities initiative, which is, we're going to get into a little more in a moment, but it's kind of our regional marketplaces that are B2B to focus on reuse and building that circular economy in different regional marketplaces, making sure those assets can find their next and highest use as close to where they exist currently as possible. So we kind of think about today's workplaces and how they're changing. I mean, we think about everything from the adoption of hybrid models to deconstruction ordinances and all of these different factors coming together to really kind of reshape how the office is thought about and how building materials are thought about and how that's all interconnected here. So Reaply's kind of trying to find the position of being in the spot to help organizations answer kind of the statements here, where it's, I need to know what resources that we have. I need to make better and more sustainable purchasing and cost decisions. So and our team needs to get rid of these resources and replace them on a cost and carbon budget. So where Reaply sits is in that position of trying to answer some of these questions. So first and foremost is understanding what you have. Then it's understanding where that's going to go and understanding your surplus so that it can get reused, but also understanding what you're potentially over procuring and then getting ahead of that issue on the front end. So it's part of this wider kind of movement to the circular economy in the sense of knowing your full supply chain in the way of understanding that your surplus can get reused when normally it would be discarded, but then you can also get ahead of it by understanding what your surplus consistently is. Perfect. So I'll kick it over to Stu and he can kind of hop into the nitty gritty here.
Thanks, Keller. Happy to be here. This is such a fantastic group, and I can almost feel like the the anticipation and like the eagerness to try and recreate the wheel, and that's what we're all about. So for any visual learners, here we see a side-by-side comparison of a linear economy and a circular economy. The two major differences you can see between these figures is that a linear economy is built in such a way that waste accumulates at the end of a product's life. This is what we're all too familiar with. This is what America is really dead set on currently, and we're looking to change that. While a circular economy designs out waste before a product is ever produced, actually. So that's really kind of the main difference. We're designing out waste before it's ever really produced, or at least designing a next life for it before that end of life of its first life comes about. So for the linear economy, that disposal stage is where we struggle the most. Like I mentioned, it's ingrained in our society. We never really recoup all the value that's within a product that we dispose of. We're just pretty much throwing away money and ruining the earth at the same time. So not to be doom and gloom, but that's essentially the big problem here. In the United States, disposal usually takes the form of landfilling, so just leaving all the waste in a pile, allowing it to break down over a long period of time, release methane emissions. In 2020, in fact, the EPA reported that landfills were responsible for 17% of the methane emissions released in the atmosphere. A circular economy, in comparison, is designed to completely disrupt this thinking and develop really long-lasting products that will not sit in a landfill. So we start this process in the design stage, so long before the product is even manufactured. The critical step, this critical step, I believe, allows us to look for opportunities to make products more easily repairable and reusable. And smart companies and businesses and cities are actually kind of tapping into that repair economy and service as a solution, more so than just selling a product maybe one time. Okay, moving on here. Okay, so the three core principles of a circular economy, if we could summarize: eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at their highest value, and then regenerate nature. Eliminating waste and pollution is what we just covered in the circular economy diagram I just had up. What if we think about all the negative consequences of a product before designing it, and then identify alternative materials and manufacturing processes to completely avoid these negative consequences? So that we already covered in depth. The second principle is circulating products and materials, but at a high level. This principle is focused on developing activities that preserve the value of materials. This includes the design of durable products, as well as designing for reuse, for remanufacturing, and recycling. Lastly, regenerate nature is saying that we should go farther than protecting our environment. We should improve it. We shouldn't use non-renewable resources, and we should promote farming practices that return biological materials back to the earth and increase biodiversity rather than deplete the land of its nutrients. So just to kind of create a couple value props, I guess. Why should I care about circular economy? How is it going to benefit my business or my day-to-day? We believe that some of the core value props here, you're able to find and source sustainable materials. Oftentimes these are local, so you can really avoid lengthy supply chains, and that leads us to our second one, where these are not only usually more affordable but also nearby. So rather than ordering something for a project and waiting months and months and months, you can source something that is local. It has a story behind it. You're not emitting a bunch of transportation carbon to receive the item, and your overall kind of embodied carbon associated with that purchase is much smaller. Reducing waste to landfill, obviously everyone can get behind that. And then taking action on embodied carbon in your building projects, which is a growing trend in architecture and construction. Obviously, it's here to stay, but in my estimation, attending like AIA, where all the architects tend to go, it's still very early. There's a lot of education needed around how can they practically approach circular economy and lower embodied carbon practices. So if we could just summarize like one statement, I guess, we believe that reuse should be the tip of the spear for any climate action in the built environment. Secondly, we know that this may feel daunting. So we love to when we work with architects and general contractors, we love to identify, a single product that we can maybe source use, or we can identify a single material that we want to plug back into the circular economy after our project is completed. If we try to say, let's do it all, it's overwhelming, and we oftentimes spin our wheels. So we like to start small. We like to find those quick wins and those low-hanging fruit of materials or assets that we know have a second life in store for them. So I wanted to introduce the Circular Cities Initiative, but I do want to leave this behind as maybe homework, or the next time that you have popcorn and you want some entertainment. Our CEO gave a really fascinating TED Talk. We're all big fans of him at Reaply, obviously, and I know that this was a life goal of his, was to really get to the the stage with the red carpet, and he did this a couple months ago. So we'll definitely share the link after this call, so people can watch the 10-minute or so video. And this leads us to the Circular Cities Initiative. What this is, and what Gary talks about in his speech, is Reaply has a goal of launching 50 public reuse marketplaces in North America by 2025. I always like to pause for a second after that because it stresses me out, keeps me up at night, wakes me up in the morning. But it's a passion of ours, and it's something that we feel is really our mission. It has to be a goal that we set, a goal that we're publicly standing by, and part of this is covering the Bay Area, right? So we already launched in the Bay Area. We have 6 cities that have been officially launched. Chicago is slated for December 7th. So if you know any Chicagoans, spread the word. But just looking at the Bay Area circular marketplace, because this was our first reuse marketplace, we learned a lot. We were focused heavily on commercial surplus building materials. That's easier said than done, because we realize that they are definitely not the lowest hanging fruit. They're not the easiest materials to find and bring visibility to, and also create demand for. We know that there is demand. You go to any reuse center in your local city, and you go to Stardust, for instance, and it's like Willy Wonka's factory. Like it's such a fun experience. As an adult, I think kids probably maybe not, they don't love it as much, but as an adult, it's so fascinating to see all of the stories behind the materials that are available. And we really want to encourage more commercial grade reuse. I think if your average attendees at a reuse center are probably residential DIYers. And that's great, right? Because they can buy 1 or 2 items, and that's amazing. They can tell the story about when they put this into their home. But really, we see a gap between commercial buyers. We don't see large construction companies going to these reuse centers and sourcing 100 doors, or pallets and pallets worth of surplus flooring tile that's still totally usable. And we want more of that, because these reuse centers, they operate on high turnover. And if they don't have people walking into their doors, and the foot traffic really making all the sales, it's not as sustainable of a path as it would be to really sell at a scale that is what the commercial buyers can bring. So we want to bring buyers that are interested in 1,000 of something versus just 1 of something, and really capturing all of that impact. One of the studies that really kind of catalyzed this whole thing, it really kicked this off, was in 2021, there was a commercial surplus building materials study that was done by San Francisco Environment Department. And I can definitely share this link after, but if you can squint with me, and in that diagram, at the very end of the study, they outlined how much surplus and overstock was actually purchased based on the material. And we realized that in some cases, there's 10 to 15% overstock that's purchased on every commercial project. If you have 100,000 square feet of flooring tile that you're buying, and you're buying 10%, 15% over that, that's really substantial. And really the plan for this today is we're going to store some of it in attic stock, but we really don't have a plan. Maybe we're going to pay a waste subcontractor to take this away and wipe our hands clean. I think that's the preferred method. Or we're going to maybe sell it back to the distributor if they have a plan for it. And the more that we peel back this onion, we realize that there really is no plan for it, and there's certainly no visibility around what's actually happening to these materials. So just wanted to share this study because it was foundational in Ripley's pursuit of the Circular Cities initiative. That being said, this is a current snapshot of the cities that we have launched in. So on the left, we have Ohio covered. We've got San Francisco. We recently launched in New York City, and that covers around 100-mile radius of New York City. So definitely bleeds into New Jersey and other states and cities. And then Chicago, like I mentioned, is coming up in 3 weeks. So we're extremely excited to launch in our home city. We're based in Chicago. We love it here. But we have a lot of work to do. After the end of the year, we have a few cities that have already paid and kind of planned for. But we're looking to get more. You don't see Phoenix on this list. I didn't want to include it because it hasn't been discussed. It hasn't been, kind of put onto our roadmap just yet. But we want it to be. We want to be in Phoenix. We want to be in the Valley of the Sun. There's a ton of great reuse already happening there. There's already an ecosystem there that exists. And we believe that Ripley would be really, really valued in that atmosphere. One comment just to make, how does a city become on this list? How does a city, rise in the ranks of all of the possible cities where we could launch? And really, we look for a few different things. A reuse economy that's already happening. So that's the first box that we like to check. The second box is looking toward an enterprise or a corporate level sponsor who can kind of front some money to launch this, but also introduce us to everyone who we need to know. Every city, every region carries its own nuance. Storage in San Francisco and New York is probably the biggest pain point, whereas in the middle of America, storage is not a problem at all. It's actually in abundance. So being able to leverage those relationships and get introduced to the right city government, the right local reuse centers, the people that are already doing the great work, we feel that corporate sponsors are probably the fastest way to do that. That being said, we love working with city governments because they play an essential role propping this up and really advocating for local businesses. All right, I will kick it back to Keller.
Perfect. Thank you, Stu. Yeah, so just kind of continuing on what Stu was talking about how to get involved and how to get kind of Phoenix and the Arizona area moving on this is really the first step is planning and socializing of identifying projects that are underway, getting using that existing momentum and really kind of building upon it, because as we see the circular economy and this movement is kind of growing everywhere at a very grassroots scale, we're looking at this as we're trying to provide the digital infrastructure to really push forward what's already in motion here and just be able to grow it and expand and scale that existing behavior that on the ground floor is occurring. So it's identifying projects or materials where there's consistent material in this way, that if you're on the surplus side, okay, we usually have this surplus, or if you're looking for a certain type of item, kind of communicating what that looks like on the demand side of the marketplace, so that the supply side can be informed of that and really kind of making that connection there. So yeah, it's really identifying that project, talking about Ripley in that way of if you see us as that connector here, is making sure that people are aware. What we're trying to do is really going to have the biggest impact at scale, and is connecting all of those dots. So the more the merrier, really. And you can get signed up. You can actually get signed up right now. I'll drop a link right here in the chat. You can get signed up on Ripley. So even though we don't officially have a Phoenix marketplace, what really accelerates that roadmap for us is the amount of interested organizations and movement that we have in a certain area. So if you continue to sign up, and if you sign up as an organization in the Phoenix or Arizona area, we build that momentum, and then we can look for sponsorship, whether it's through private enterprise or through municipal partnerships, things like that. So we highly recommend you create a free account, see what's already on the platform there, and start looking around, kind of getting an idea of what that marketplace looks and feels like. And then spread the word. So whether it's in your local area or folks that you work with around the country, you can spread the word to any of them. We want to get as many users on here as possible. And we want to make sure that this momentum that's kind of really cultivating in the reuse space and in the circular economy space is continuing, and we take full advantage of that momentum so that we can replace some outdated linear systems. Yeah, and this is just another good visual map of kind of our focus areas more or less right now. You can see that we are pretty spread around, but we do have some more high density areas. And this is something that we would love to see, that bright red dot in the middle of Phoenix here in the next couple months. Be able to get that momentum and build out that city ecosystem to where it's kind of a one-stop shop for a vetted marketplace. It's business to business. And so you're going to be operating with an organization on the other side. So you can get that confidence of knowing that those materials are coming from a vetted organization. So yeah, I guess to kind of wrap it up, we're really, really happy to be able to speak with this group here. Stu and I are on behalf of Reaply, and we believe that a circular world is within reach, and we're gonna build it together. We need everybody involved here to make this happen. So you can sign up for the platform via that link in the chat, or if you want to scan a QR code, you can do it via mobile as well. Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Keller, actually, a question came in on the chat about whether or not the Denver Boulder area is either on your partnership list or somewhere in your sites.
Oh, it is definitely on the list. However, it's not set in stone. As like we haven't identified a date to launch or an enterprise sponsor to really help us launch in Denver Boulder. But we would love for that to happen. I know that Rocky Mountain Institute is attending. I saw someone attending from there, and we respect that organization a ton. One thing just to quickly mention. Sponsorships are less about a financial commitment. It's actually a pretty small amount that we're asking for. It's more so time commitment and the belief that this is truly inevitable. One of our sponsors is Google, and they picked 5 cities for us to launch in. And it's not because Google sees insane profits from this. They simply believe like circular economy is inevitable. It is going to happen. And we believe that Reaply is a good vessel to make that happen. Another thing just to mention, I didn't say on the when we were talking about the public reuse marketplace, but this is entirely free for organizations and businesses to join. There's no fees around donations on either side. The only time that there is a fee is if someone is selling something for a dollar amount. Reaply has a payment processor through Stripe, so we process payments and pay them 5%, but also we have a 10% convenience fee. So just wanted to be transparent where this is completely free. You can join it today and you can browse and see what's available. And it's free to buy. There's no fees at all there. And then once again, donations. But we've learned that the reuse centers and kind of the early adopters in these marketplaces generally have a technology stack that is super antiquated. They're operating a GoDaddy website that can't really handle any inventory. It's a pain to update, or maybe they even can't update it. They're usually using spreadsheets or maybe sending out mass emails to people when they have deconstructed materials that become available. And this is just super laborious. One of the really cool ways that we're seeing deconstruction users use this is right when they have a deconstruction project that's on their docket, they itemize all the materials, they post it to Reaply, and they try to find homes for it, and they try to sell it before it's even deconstructed. And I think this is really the optimal way. So we can almost eliminate that reuse center, not from helping out because they play a key role, but the fewer times that we have to move materials, the better from a carbon perspective.
We're starting to get lots of questions in the chat, so I don't know if this is the point where you're ready to open things up for questions and discussion. Sure. If so, then what what we'll do is we'll go ahead and look at the questions that have come in and give those folks a chance to ask them. But from this point forward, why don't folks go ahead and start raising your hand? I'd ask that you go ahead and use the Zoom tool so we can keep a little bit of a track of it. And that way we'll give people a chance to get some more information going. And I think we'd flagged the question about Denver and Boulder. Karen, why don't you unmute yourself and ask about the success stories?
It would help if I could operate the computer. I'm just curious if on any of the 6 cities that you've launched already, are there any fun success stories, connections of buyers with sellers, maybe some interesting stuff that got sold?
There are, yeah. It's very fun because the flavors of our regions, of our different cities are completely different. The focus in the Bay Area is more on building materials and office FF&E, and then the Ohio marketplaces, it skews more towards manufacturing, byproduct, and industrial waste. So I have 2 success stories, one from both sides of kind of the realm here. In the Bay Area, recently we helped a major California general contractor. They had portable job sites, so they had about 24 desks, file cabinets, whiteboards, really anything that you need for a portable job site. And they were actually looking to reuse these items, not internally because they've already kind of served a few lives, but actually externally, and they wanted to avoid the landfill. Lo and behold, the California Highway Patrol found these assets and were interested in setting up a very low-cost surveillance unit that they couldn't really even share details on to us, but probably catching Californian speeders, I would imagine. But they needed office supplies, and it was an unlikely match because those 2 entities really would never interact with each other. So that was a really fun example. Another one that's coming out of Ohio, there's a steel manufacturing plant that works with us called Cleveland Cliffs. And we love singing their praises because they love to divert waste and find new closed loops. And we work with their environmental health and safety department. So in their case, they have mountains of railroad ties. And then they also have thousands of these plastic steel drums that have metal caging around them. They've all been triple washed and they're ready to kind of go into the open market. And they found 2 separate closed loops. So they actually have 2 different people that bring trucks to their yard. And once those trucks are filled with materials of their choice, then they replace it with an empty truck. And before Reaply, before this marketplace existed, they were having to pay pretty extreme amounts to dispose of the plastic and metal bins. And they had no responsible solution to dispose of the railroad ties. And they have over 10,000 miles of railroad ties on their yard. So it's not a small waste stream.
Tracy, you had a question in the chat, and I don't know if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask that live.
Sure. My question's around metrics. I would guess that you have the values for your carbon savings and savings and all of those things. But I was wondering, do you also measure regional quantities and activities, for example, to see if it makes an overall impact on regions where the market has been launched, in the sense of you have the numbers that you've measured from the platform because that information is available to you, but does that region, is it sending less to landfill every other year since the market's been in place or so on? So kind of the validation on the other side of measuring impact. And I was wondering if you've set metrics up to look into that, or if it's impossible, or if it's something that you're thinking about doing for the future.
Yeah, Tracy, that's a great question. And yes, well, the metrics are incredibly important to us. Capturing that data is incredibly important to us. So we kind of do it in a couple different ways on our platform. For the circular cities specifically, an organization will be able to see directly their personal impact. Right when you log into the homepage, it will show you essentially the cost savings associated with reuse, the carbon savings, as well as the weight diverted from landfill. So that's kind of like front and center from an organizational impact. Now, for our like enterprise clients that are on annual subscriptions, we do have some more robust reporting that they're able to access and filter. But we do have reports from our system as well that we take those regional marketplaces and kind of consolidate them based on geography to help understand what the impact of that specific area is. And from there, we're kind of like determining what a healthy marketplace looks like, what a growing marketplace looks like, and how to continue that movement as we get more and more participation in this. So the data is a huge part of this. As part of creating an item, we basically ask for a user to input the weight of the item as well as the replacement value of those items. So when that item is transacted, we can then use that and calculate it through our metrics. We are able to capture estimated embodied carbon avoided for some items as well, working with some sustainability partners to be able to get those metrics and dial those in, that side of things. But yeah, the data and the metrics is a huge part of this, and it's really helping inform our growth strategy and making sure organizations understand their personal impact as well.
Super. I think Hans was next with his question. And folks, you don't have to go through the chat, but perhaps either use the virtual or even real raise hand feature so that we can know you're waiting for a question.
Thanks, sir. This is Hans from Republic of Ireland, a lecturer in civil engineering. As you know, construction industry is quite widely and deeply regulated in many countries. So I would like to know how to foster actually reusing construction industry, because based on my understanding, standardization would become a kind of barrier for widespread implementation of this reuse policy in many countries based on different design codes. How to foster a standardization in reuse for construction product? Thanks.
Great question, Hans. And really, we're swimming upstream. You know, the construction industry today is not equipped. It doesn't enable. It kind of fights back reuse. So one of the ways, and this isn't, I wish I had the answer to this fully, because you know, I would probably be giving a TED talk if I did, but I don't. I think what we know, Hans, is it's a team effort between the architect, the GC involved, and the project owner. The expectations have to be set very clearly with the project owner around, hey, some of these materials may not be within warranty. Is that okay? Okay, it depends on the material. In one of the projects that we're helping with as kind of a reuse sourcing expert with an architect, we've met with the project owner multiple times. They kind of put us through the pressure test, and we kind of settled on identifying 3 or 4 main materials that we're looking to source used. So like I mentioned earlier, starting small rather than trying to source all used materials, they're looking to, in their case, find ceiling tiles and flooring. And lighting fixtures. Those are really kind of the main 3 items that they're looking to. And the reason why we landed on those is because they're less stringent around the warranty. They know and they believe that if Ripley says this is surplus new quality, and the person selling it, in this case, it's a flooring distributor who has kind of storage and backstock, if you will. If they say that this is also surplus new quality, and the architect says, and they inspect it and say it's surplus new quality, then by all intents and purposes, this is surplus new. And the project owner is then okay with it. So it's really a group effort to get around the lack of a warranty, because as we know, there is no warranty system for used materials. Manufacturers aren't racing to do that either, because you know, it fuels their business when they sell new items. So that's one of the ways that we're trying to get around some of the barriers there. But as standardization goes, Hans, there's a lot of work to be done. I think the more and more policy that comes out, the more and more progress companies like Repley, but similar companies like Urban Machine is doing with reclaimed lumber, the more activity and success stories that we can kind of share. I think the standardization is going to be on the manufacturers and kind of on the higher ups that really can control the systemic issue that we have today with it being a linear economy, not able to support any reuse.
Jen, I think you were next.
Yes, I had a question about, some of the overstock that you had mentioned. I was curious if you had been able to make any inroads with either like a national contractors, organizations, or groups potentially, because it seems like there's this kind of unmet need potentially. But are you feeling like you're starting to make traction or kind of having any success in engaging those groups with your platform?
Yes, lots of kind of baked in questions there. But as far as like leveraging national contracting groups, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of curiosity. There's still, like I mentioned earlier, a need for kind of carbon 101. Like operational carbon has really been the focus for everyone. We do extremely well building efficient buildings now. Embodied carbon has kind of been swept under the rug, or maybe it's just too scary to address. But we do see that there's more and more interest from kind of nation leading contractors. The smaller architects, smaller contractors, we have seen less traction with them, but they're faster to make decisions and they're more scrappy. So there's benefits of being a small and kind of nimble operation. But generally, we've seen more progress and traction from a general contractor that has a whole sustainability department, for instance. It's a kind of a luxury to have that, to have managers that are overseeing lead progress on a project. But we've seen a lot of traction with those people. As far as national groups and associations, if there's any that you'd recommend that we get in touch with, there are a handful that we started to kind of break some bread with and get acquainted with. But there haven't been any like official partnerships, or Repley hasn't come on as like a sponsored member or anything like that with any of these associations just yet.
If I could ask one more quick question too, and I don't know if you have the ability to kind of rattle them off, but are you able to kind of gauge, like, do you have a top 5 or top 10 list of things that you find have worked really well kind of across all the city groups that you're in terms of products that are moving on your site?
Yeah. So I think interior fixtures are really kind of the lowest hanging fruit. I'm sitting in an office with probably 50 high-end office chairs, maybe 20 sit-stand desks, and everything that goes with that. That's really the easiest, lowest hanging fruit that we've identified, simply because there's already a ton of secondary routes for these materials to go. There's already demand that is kind of baked in. We see in nearly every city that there's an office furniture remanufacturing or refurbished center that they are looking to get on every decommission that's happening, and they want to take as much inventory as possible, fix it up, and sell it, because the value is retained so well in, say, a Herman Miller Aeron chair, for instance. And I think with work changing, it's really kind of just been kind of a perfect storm in that regard. Beyond that, some successful materials, I would say that flooring has probably taken the cake with us in as far as building materials goes. We work closely with brands like Interface, and they've been obviously doing, flooring take back and recycling for a really long time before it was cool. And there's a lot of push from the manufacturers as well, because they don't have any visibility around flooring after they sell it the first time. And in many cases, they're looking to take that back and recycle it if they can. They just haven't had that opportunity yet where it has made sense. But flooring is really kind of the easiest building material that we've identified.
Thank you.
I'm going to hop in with a question here. There's such a huge range of materials that are subject to this. Do you find a need for, or how do people connect? Is there a need for what would be the material equipment of the library's Dewey Decimal System so that people can connect with each other and know they're talking, offering what somebody else is then able to find?
Yeah, so I'll give my quick answer to this, and then Keller may have a different one. But we believe that there needs to be a community around reuse. I think that what you've done with this community speaks volumes. Reaply aims to create a kind of a directory or like a community of local reuse heroes for people to work with. So if you're searching on the marketplace and maybe you don't find something to buy or receive as a donation, maybe you're able to still find maybe a new business connection or a local organization that you weren't aware of, that you can maybe meet because of Reaply and start to message them and communicate with them. And we feel like that's almost as valuable as, finding 10 hardly used Herman Miller Aeron chairs because you've been, itching to buy them from your local economy. So serving as kind of a directory, as a community, a place where people can learn about new technologies, but also new business practices, maybe new policies, and really just sharing that knowledge. I think part of circular economy is knowledge sharing. And Reaply has a goal of being as open source as possible. Like, what we're doing is not cutting edge. Like, this is pretty basic. Like, we've all been sharing since kindergarten, and then there was like a couple decades where we were like not sharing, and now we're trying to get people to share and get back to those roots, because it is a part of the human nature that we believe is very authentic, and it exists in all of us.
Cool. Keller, do you have a view on whether or not anything would be helpful to get a common language or taxonomy for things, or is that not even necessary?
Yeah, so the way we kind of look at it is we understand that it's very hard to standardize things. We understand that it's very hard to kind of create that cohesion in something that doesn't have that cohesive ecosystem right now. So a big focus of ours is making sure the platform is suitable for anybody and everybody to search how they want to and what seems easy. So when it comes to looking for specific materials, you can search by things like the name. It'll pick up specific tags on the item, as well as the category of the item specifically. So there's lots of different ways to filter through. You can even go by condition and things like that. So we want to make sure that we can basically make it as accessible as possible, knowing that there really isn't that common language quite yet, and give the user an ability to communicate with the owner of the item before even making an offer or a purchase as well. So there's the ability to kind of kick off a conversation directly attached to the listing so that it keeps the conversation pertinent to the item, but really allows you to kind of ask more questions if you have them, or if you're not getting all the information that you need, you can request some more information there. So yeah, that is a very tough part. And I think that kind of goes with the standardization of materials as a whole, which is a really complicated and tricky issue to get that far upstream. Maybe as the circular economy grows, there can be some more standard language, more universal language. But we feel at this point, it's about accessibility, engagement, and participation. So we want to make sure that we can facilitate anybody and everyone, depending on how they're going to look at it or search for the items.
Super. Thank you. Brian, you'd put a question in the chat, but so far I haven't seen you unmute to ask that. If you'd like, please do go ahead and jump in. And if not, Tracy has another question. And I think whichever of you unmutes first should go ahead and go.
Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot, Kathy. Yeah, I'm just curious, when you mentioned that there's a lot of overage, 10 to 15%. On projects, do you attribute that to what situations? Is it over ordering because of breakage and installation? Is it not having accurate measurements up front? Is it an uncertainty about changes in the scope of the project? Just curious how that breaks down.
Yeah, I think your latter example is probably accounts for some of that, where the project may change and they just want to kind of protect themselves and have enough. I think part of it is skilled laborers, where if someone is extremely skilled labor, they may not have to dig into extra material as much as maybe someone that's maybe less skilled, where now they're having to use, you know, part of that 10% over purchasing, you know, to fulfill maybe either errors or you know, sloppy work or whatever the case may be. They just feel like it's a good buffer to have. And in some areas, it's quite standard to purchase that level of overage. In some materials, it's not, but like for instance, gypsum board and ceiling tiles, it's very common to purchase that extra amount. And I don't think anyone has ever walked into a building and said, "Wow, these ceiling tiles look pretty used. I don't think I'm going to stay in here longer than I need to. I can't even give you guys my business. You guys have used ceiling tiles." It's such a low hanging fruit in our eyes, and it's a huge waste contributor, along with carpet as well. You know, those are kind of two main areas, but it's really situational, Brian. It's super situational based on kind of the GCs, the architects, who's all involved, and just the skill, but also the ever changing scope of the project.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. So it sounds like it could be an educational opportunity as well, just to let them know that there's a resource when they do, you know, have whatever didn't need to get used up in the project. So thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, attic stock is super common, you know, in the generation of new buildings. But many times the attic stock there is no visibility around what's actually in the attic stock. It just exists. And maybe the building manager digs in there the next time he needs to replace certain things and has it. But it's a very tribal knowledge event where it's not like there's a possibility of them selling what's in their attic stock, or you know, even having a digital version of what's in their attic stock. One of the really cool ways that Repley has been brought into a deconstruction project was creating digital twins around all of the assets that were coming out of the space for the architect to basically include in their scope. That's not really how we intended Repley to be used, but like it's fascinating to see architects kind of connect the dots and say, hey, well, if you're able to create digital twins for all the materials, could we potentially use that during kind of the design phase? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. I'd love to see Repley included in more projects like that.
Very cool. Tracy, you've been patient. You have another question?
Thank you, Kathy. Just kind of wondering, piggybacking off of Jennifer's question, what are the more difficult products that you've been finding that, you know, either deserve a shout out and some extra attention, or perhaps a different way of dealing with them that might not be so much either in demand or usable with the circular process in mind? And I did have one more question, and one more quick point was that I'm not sure if you're familiar, and apologies if so, but the new version of LEED V5 does have an entry in it for the reuse of interior products. So I'm not sure if that's something that you've kind of looked into, but I think what you're doing right now fits really well into fulfilling that need for that. So it could be just some maybe an article or resource that goes after that goes along with that. So I'll just stop there, since I see that we don't have much time left and some other people are unmuted.
Yeah, Tracy, that's really helpful. Yeah, no, and that's fantastic as a reference for LEED, and we're really excited about that. But when it comes to the first part of the question, I'll hop in because I know Stu probably has an answer as well. But I think one of the high-hanging fruit kind of group of items that what we've seen is actually hotel rooms and hotels. Sometimes those come up as decommissions where there's refurbishment and things occurring at different hotels and cycling those through. And those items are actually really hard to find homes for, just with the amount of use that that they have going through there, and it's mattresses and different types of items. We tend to have difficulty with hotel rooms specifically.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that. In my silly brain, it's like, okay, well, a 5-star hotel is getting rid of all their stuff. It should flow down to a 4-star hotel, and then a 3-star hotel, and eventually end up at a Super 8, right? But that's just not the reality. The ownership structure around hotels and property management is very complex, and it's not as simple as we can just plug this into a nearby kind of lower tier hotel that's under the same ownership. I wish it was that easy. And mattresses are extremely hard to reuse unless, there are some organizations that are plugging them into the homeless community. I think like that makes a lot of sense for used mattresses. But there's less recycling opportunities. There's way less kind of remanufacture and actual reuse opportunities for items like mattresses. And like Keller mentioned, extremely high traffic in those areas. And also there's no price on carbon, right? I think like that is a huge thing. If there was a price on carbon and people were kind of dinged and billed for being unsustainable, then I think there would be I know that there would be a more of a financial push for them to make things work. Right now, if it doesn't make economic sense, it's not easy to get approved, even if it makes complete logical sense.
We are counting down with just a few minutes left. I don't know, Stuart or Keller, if you have any final comments that you want to share with us. I think you've given us a lot of information. There have also been some great things posted in the chat. So I encourage everybody to try out those links, lots of things that have been shared. And we can also share that information as we share the recording. If there, give you one, like Keller or Stuart, anything else? Or shall we? If not, I just want to thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot. There's fantastic questions there. We're always happy to kind of really dive into the nitty gritty and peel back this whole onion that is reuse and this growing ecosystem. So thanks everyone for coming. We're always excited to talk about this to folks, because I mean, we're trying to build a marketplace from essentially scratch and using that local momentum to grow more of a circular movement here. So your attendance is appreciated. We welcome you to check out the materials in the chat, watch our CEO's TED Talk, as well as sign up for the marketplace for free. It doesn't hurt to explore. You're not going to be geolocated or anything, and you're going to be able to access everything on the market and see what's out there. So we recommend you just look around and look through re-release materials, and hopefully it interests you and we can find a way to collaborate together.
Yeah, no comments, just a lot of gratitude over here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Keller. Thank you to all of our participants and the energy and enthusiasm that you've brought today. We will have a brief survey as we end the meeting, just looking for your feedback on how we can continue to improve these sessions. And also, because you've registered for this session, you'll receive an invitation to our next month's meeting. That's the panel that we have scheduled in December. And hopefully we will see you again. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your week. And we really appreciate your joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.